Part 5. The End Run, Berlin. Every time Alex sat in the cockpit of a hell chopper, he wondered if it might be his last. It wasn't just the fear of flying, or the fact that he and his parents had nearly died on their escape to New Purgatory when he was young. Flying was a rarity in the New World. The reality was that the only remaining governments had birds in the air. He had been lucky enough to learn how to fly one from Layla, who had learned from Tommy. Now he was flying above an ocean with the last few people he could trust. So many gone, so many dead. While everything was crumbling around him, Alex felt more at peace than he had in a long time. Friends dead, family dead. Council turned me into a renegade terrorist again. Janet'll kill me if she sees me, and I've lost my home, he thought. All in all, I'd say I'd done well. It's exactly what Beruger wanted, Alex said to himself. He was alone. Vixer, Ferris, and Keller were in the compact hold. 4 people in total. 4 people to take on several armies. His first team had been 11 strong when he attacked John Morrison's tower. If there was ever a time Alex wished his old friends were still alive, it was now. Still, as relaxed as he was, the flight was long and boring. Alex had his doubts that Beruger would send off birds to intercept him. No, Beruger wanted to make a show of Alex attacking his city. The man wanted to be vindicated. It would be a better victory than Alex's own death, and Beruger would be hailed a hero. Alex punched in a few keys on the information center connected to the Hell Chopper controls. Jack Newsom's image appeared holographically in front of him. "Is it how you hoped?" the old man asked. "Couldn't tell you yet, Jack. I won't know until it's over. Eye on the prize as always. Janet? She'll do what she has to. She doesn't have a choice." "We always have a choice, Alex. You've always made the choices Janet wishes she could, but that's why you lead the troops. Fight, and the woman who thought herself to be your equal plays politics and runs a city." "If you have something to say, then say it," Alex replied. "Janet changed, Alex. She's not the same roughneck daughter of a soldier with too much to prove anymore. Her journey ended when John Morrison lay dead, and her father was avenged. Run a New Purgatory? She could have taken it or left it. She chose to stay, to be reliable and dependable," the old man explained. "Ah, now I see where this is going," Alex said. "Janet stepped up into a role I didn't want. I thought I was done. Circumstances changed, so I came back to solve another problem. And created more," Jack replied. "You think I don't know that?" Alex asked. Jack ignored him. "Meanwhile, Janet still doesn't find herself on the front lines like you do anymore." "Why are you telling me all of this, Jack? You of all people know why I didn't stop fighting. Why I could never stop fighting. You think the idea of sitting in Alonso's drinking all day and teaching new recruits how to fire a weapon sounds appealing to me? War is what I know. Raiding, sacking convoys, killing people that need to be killed so other people can live, that's my fucking reality. I couldn't do anything else. You know that feeling. It's why you couldn't keep Neala. It's why I couldn't keep Layla. And it's how I got her killed." Jack was silent for a few moments. Usually he would have a reply of some fashion. Alex could feel tears welling up behind his eyes, but held them back. "You know, Jack, there are some men who love war and have never fought in it. Some men who hate it for having been a part of it. And then there are men like us, who fall in between because it's all we know. I was a refugee in an unfamiliar place fighting to avenge my mother and all the friends I watched die in the ghettos. I fought an impossible threat and started a rebellion. When I was done with that, I wanted to run away from myself. Seeing my friends fall, it made the goal we accomplished matter less. So I tried to live on a beach, tried to forget war and death away from everyone except the one person I loved the most. Instead, I came back and fought with more fury than I thought I could sate by helping the city. Better timing I could not have picked. A new enemy, one beyond my reach that fights with intelligence and guile instead of the brute force tactics John Morrison liked to employ. Losing Elias, losing Dellin, you, those things drove me. Like there was unfinished business. If Beruger took over New Purgatory, everything you all died for was for nothing. Trying to hold on to the dead pushed the living further away, Jack. I understand now why you were so callous, hardened to loss, why it never bothered you. You knew you had to be, otherwise you'd get sloppy like I did. You chose to let people die to advance the game. I tried to save everyone, and have damn near lost both the game and the players. So here I am, prepared to fight another battle far from where this war in my heart started, to avenge 2 more losses, one of love and one of friendship. Killing a tyrant is just a byproduct. People like to compare the 2 of us, Jack. Layla certainly did, but they're wrong about me. I'm not the Reaper. As much as I wear your name on my dog tag, it doesn't make it true. A Reaper cares not for the taste of vengeance. The Reaper kills because that is his trade. He gives up willingly his own desires, his friends, those he loves to accomplish his one task. Those were things I can't and will never let go of. So when I lost those things, I stopped being the Sentinel. There's nothing left of me to protect, and if I'm not the Reaper, what am I? A harbinger. A harbinger of vengeance that I carry in my heart and mind that outstretches to the gun in my hand. Alex paused. He had no more to say. Like all harbingers, Alex, what you leave behind won't be what you expect. There comes a time when your thirst for all you want and all you know will be at its end. That'll be the day you retire. The day you no longer seek to raise that weapon and hunt for what rebellion can no longer provide, Jack said. Alex listened to Jack and wanted to believe the old man wasn't correct. Like so many other of his ramblings, he failed to see the lesson, the point of it all. Maybe that's what Jack was driving at. I hope you're right, old man. Though I get the feeling this might be the last time I get to tell you that. I might not be the Reaper, but before I can stop, there is one more head I have to collect. Nothing and no one will stop me. I can't. They don't have a choice, Alex said. I know you'll do what you have to, Alex. You always have. My only hope is that when this is finished, you can walk away, Jack replied. Any parting words? Alex asked. The binary ghost put a hand to his chin, for a moment as if to think. Those moments of false humanity bothered Alex, but he never voiced it. Remember those that got you here. Elias, Van, Tyler, Remy, Otto, Nyala, Tommy, Brandon, Dylan, Talia, Ezra, Gajil, Sam, the Fallen. They fail because of your goals, because of our goals. And remember the ones still alive will follow you down that same path. What about Layla? Alex asked. Yes, what about her, Alex? You already mentioned that she tried to stop you, to stifle you. What point is there to her? She tried to do what Nyala did to me. Her fate ended the same. Alex shook his head. You're a real son of a bitch, Jack. She was right the whole time. Had I listened to her, if I had just walked away, she'd be alive today. You mentioned all those names, all those people I could never forget. To leave her off that list is a spat in her face and mine. If I die today, it's for all of them. But I'll tell you this, Jack Newsom. I'll go to my grave knowing she never gave up on me. She never threw me away. The image of Jack Newsom stared at him for a few moments. His face was morose, almost. But in his rage, Alex hadn't paid any attention. He slammed a fist hard down on the console, and the image of the old man winked away. Alex opened the cockpit door and looked at his team. We're about an hour out from Berlin. The first part of the plan is simple. We touch down and fight to the radio tower. After that, it changes. We hit the ground and make for the reactor, set it to explode just like the one in China. If what we do at the tower works, it'll be an easy fight. Questions? Chances we get out of this alive? Keller asked. Shaley and Vixer looked at the assassin cross. What? I'm taking bets. We're all with you, Alex, no matter the cost, Vixer said aloud. And I'll take that bet. Put me down for survival. 2 beers. While Vixer and Keller settled on terms, Shaley stood up and made her way over to the doorway of the cockpit. Alex waited for her to talk, but she just pushed him into the room and closed the door behind her. So this is it, then? She asked after a few moments. Alex crossed his arms and stared at her. Yeah, Shaley, this is it. The last run into the fire. Is it going just like you thought? Back against the wall? No friends to call on? Alex smiled at her. I've still got friends. I've got you and Vixer. Keller's a hired gun, but he's about as loyal as I could have hoped for. Do you really believe that? Shaley asked. Which part? Alex replied. Shaylee shook her head. The part where you believe we'll win this. The part where you wish you still had the people closest to you at your side. The part you left out. Alex felt worn down. He reached into his coat for another cigarette and found that he only had 2 left. He put one between his lips and decided to save the other one for later. I wish they were all here, Shaylee, Alex said as he lit up his smoke. Does that answer your question? It answers one, Shaylee replied, moving closer to Alex and taking the cigarette from his mouth. She placed it between her lips and took a long drag. Did you ever care about me, the way I care about you? Alex watched the medic inhale and exhale the fire from her lungs. She never coughed. Repeatedly, she had told him to quit smoking. It turned out she had just kept her habits well hidden. You already know the answer to that, Alex replied, and you know why I can't show it. You've pushed us all hard and taken us from one side of the world to the other, Alex. We're all at the brink. I want a goddamn honest answer to my question, Shaylee demanded. Alex reached out and took a cigarette back from Shaylee, breathed it in deeply, and exhaled a cloud of smoke that seemed to be more than he had brought into his lungs. The truth? The truth is that I'm not here without you or Vixer or Keller. I want to make sure you all get out of this, even if it means I don't. I owe everyone else who bled for me that much. But I also understand reality. Hope is gone, Shaylee. Politics are what put me on this path in the first place, so I'm doing what I should have done at the start, hunting down the ones that cause pain and suffering and death. When I'm finished with them, they'll hope they're in hell. Shaylee stared at Alex, who, despite his speech, had remained calm. All this war, all the things you're chasing after made you this way, Shaylee said. There's no better answer. We'll do what we must, Alex said. He could see wetness around Shaylee's eyes. He had given her the truth, the picture behind the puzzle, and what she found wasn't the answer she wanted. There was no real revelation, no great answer to an unanswerable question. There was only death and its effects on mankind. He reached out to her and grabbed her hand. Shaylee looked down at his grasp and tightened her own grip on his hand. She turned towards him and gave him a last kiss that Alex returned. Then she gently pulled away. I like that answer better, she said as she left the cockpit. Alex shook his head. He knew that sometimes the truth people needed to hear and the truth they were given were 2 different things. Shaylee had taught him that. That made it not feel like a lie. His thoughts were interrupted by a klaxon ringing on the console behind him. Janet was at her base camp in Berlin, hovering over a computer console. She hated being here. She was surrounded by her own troops, but just beyond the perimeter, Beruger soldiers, augmented or otherwise, patrolled. It all felt wrong. The same people she had fought against 6 months ago, she was now in charge of defending, along with the other council nations. After a few moments, her call was finally answered. Janet, Alex said. Scans picked you up. All channels are being monitored. You should turn around now or you'll be shot down, Janet replied. You know I won't do that, Janet, Alex said. Alex, I don't know what you have planned, but if you fly into Berlin's airspace, you're going to get knocked out of the sky by the AD towers before you have a chance to do anything. I figured. We're not in your airspace. I'm just going on a trip with some friends. I hear the German wastes are nice this time of year. One of Beruger's liaisons pulled on Janet's arm. You must order him to surrender, and there need be no more fighting. Beruger is willing to speak with him. Janet didn't bother hiding the disgust on her face as she looked back at the German, but she leaned back down to the microphone. The man placed a piece of paper with writing in front of her. Alex, Beruger is asking you to surrender, that there will be no more fighting if you land on the outskirts where teams can reach you. He wants this to end as much as you do. Tell the soldier behind you to take his script and stick it up his ass, Alex replied. The German soldier pushed Janet out of the way and went to speak into the microphone when he was met by a rifle butt across the jaw from another soldier in a coat, his face covered by a hood. Janet moved back over to the microphone. There were still the other nation's representatives surrounding her, so she had to be careful with what she said. Alex, do not make me pick between them and you. Don't ask me to make that choice. After everything we've been through, we've built, I can't make that decision without remembering an entire city rests on my shoulders, Janet explained. Like I said, Janet, I'm just here on a trip. Trust me, Alex answered. Then the communication cut out. He's clearly lying, General Androv announced. He's also correct. He hasn't flown into Berlin's airspace, Cale Woodson said. The hood-covered soldier helped the German liaison up. That is not the point. It is no coincidence he is here, the man said groggily. Trust me. Words she had heard so often, from her father, from Jack Newsom, now from Alexander Velasco. A common swan song. There's nothing we can do but wait, Janet finally said. No, we must eliminate him now if he refuses to surrender, the liaison said. We can't, the Jerusalem representative said. That is not our way. Velasco may be a fugitive, but he has not attacked. He has one aircraft and is severely outnumbered. What can one man and one aircraft truly do? Janet let a smile come across her face. A lot, she thought. A whole fucking lot. Vixer stood behind Alex in the cockpit. Are we still in the neutral zone? We are, but we're low enough to escape detection, at least for now. We gotta hope this little tape Jack pointed us to does its job. Alex set the bird down and made for the hold where the rest of his team waited. We need to settle up on our plans now, Alex said. First part's easy. Take the radio tower and let the toy do its job. More interested in part 2 of this plan, Keller said. Alex gave him a nod. I'll need 3 of you to infiltrate the Cloudbreaker reactor and set remote explosives. The hardest part will be getting there, but you'll have a diversion. And this tape of yours is going to do that? Keller asked. If it doesn't, then we leave and come up with a new plan. But I'm asking for the 3 of you to trust me. We've come this far. Once the tape is in play, I'm going for Beruger's lab. It's the birdcage in the center of the city. Now, the files we scooped from Australia have the reactor and the birdcage staged near each other by about a mile. We'll land on the reactor, and I'll go on foot while the rest of you handle the explosives. You'll be dead on foot, Alex. Shit, even if the 3 of us covered you, Vixer trailed. That's out of the question. I go to Beruger alone. I can move faster that way. When you're finished, you take the bird and get out. Keller can fly it. Keller shook his head. I'm all for suicidal missions, Alex, but we're drawing the long sticks here. You don't stand a chance alone. Even if you survive, what are we supposed to do? Fly around until you call for pickup? Alex raised an eyebrow at Keller. Right, the mercenary replied. He knew better. No, Keller is right, Shaley said. We move together or not at all. I'm sorry, Shaley. This is the only way. You all know it. I'm not losing any more of you. Not today. Vixer crossed her arms and looked at Alex. She knew he needed her to consent. She was the only person Alex could trust in a combat situation. Alex could tell she was weathered by the last 6 months. Her once pristine uniform was covered in cuts and dusty. Her face was scarred and her hair unkempt. She looked free. What does the tape do, Alex? Vixer asked. Makes this plan a hell of a lot easier. For everyone. If you trust me, if it works, we'll make it out of this. Alex looked around the hold at his team. They were all silent for a few moments. Keeley Vixer shrugged. Fuck it. I'm in. Me too, Hollis Keller said. Alex looked over at Shaley, who gave him a woeful nod. Alex moved down the crew bay and slammed his fist on the ramp lift control. Then let's go. Alex led his team through the hot, swampy muck that used to be Spandauer Forest. It was a strange place. Some areas had been cleared out, where others felt much like the forest had never been touched. Must have been protected by the shield, Keller noted. Not much in the way of radiation. Alex, what are we looking for? I didn't see a radio tower on the way in, Vixer said. It's because it's hidden in the trees, along with whatever protection Beruger leaves with it. I'm betting it's little, Alex replied. The team moved and slashed through the water with Alex at the front. All had their rifles raised, but the only sound was of crickets and frogs. The moonlight was their only glow. Alex tread along, certain of where he was going and a place he had never been, then held up a fist signaling for his team to stop. He reached up to his ear and clicked his comm. Keller, up ahead. See that? Odd place for a building, out here in the middle of a forest, Keller replied softly. There were steel steps and grating that led up to a crow's nest. Above it, a solitary satellite dish pointing back towards the city of Berlin. "Now what the hell is that for?" Shaylee whispered. "Two hostiles scoped," Vixer cut in. "Augmented heavily. No telling if there are more inside or not." Alex pointed to Shaylee and motioned for her to follow into the dense forest. "We'll cause a disturbance. Keller, get in close and do what you do best. Vixer, I want you to cover him." A single click over the comm was Alex's affirmative. He and Shaylee quietly moved into the darkness. Keller made for the tower but stopped halfway. He saw that the soldiers were looking at their consoles, not the surroundings. He spotted a nearby tree that ran parallel to the tower and climbed it. "What is he doing?" Vixer said over the comm. "Cut the chatter," Alex replied. Keller found a solid branch that hung over the station. He pulled himself on top of it and moved across. When he felt he was close enough, he made the jump to the platform. The soldiers turned from their consoles, but Keller had drawn his blade from the chest holster. Though Keller was a bulky man, Alex watched him move with the same grace he had witnessed in Mikhail Koslov. Keller's blade slashed horizontally across the first soldier's throat. The second raised his weapon and fired, only to hit its already dead ally. Keller threw a kick that knocked the body into his other foe, catching the soldier off balance. Hollis switched his grip, lightly tossing the blade so it faced downward towards his wrist, and with all force plunged it into the soldier's solar plexus. The automaton soldier gurgled and tried to raise his weapon again. Hollis attempted to twist and push the blade deeper, but the soldier was unaffected by the pain. It simply stared Keller in the eyes as it struggled to push the mercenary off. Keller ripped the blade out and proceeded to stab at the soldier's throat. Once, twice, 3 times until it finally collapsed. Once he was sure it lay dead, Hollis took a deep breath. "All clear." Alex, Shaylee, and Vixer made their way up the platform. Hollis was wiping his blade off on one of the soldiers' fatigues. Alex had never seen anyone take out Beruger's augmented soldiers so efficiently. One slash, and the other with multiple stab wounds. Alex gave him a nod and made his way over to the central control unit. He noted that the design mirrored that of the base in Australia. "Tapes were already old when I was a kid. Did Beruger think he was pulling one over on people? Who knows?" he thought. Alex placed the tape in a similar receptacle to that of the one at Beruger's other base. Jack Newsom's face appeared on the monitor to the side. "You realize now what you'll be doing?" Jack asked. Alex didn't look at the man. He had figured it out while they were still in Australia. He pushed the receptacle closed. "Is it broadcasting?" Alex asked. "You can walk away from this now. Go back to hiding. You'll live and keep your friends in Berlin from dying. Keep your team from dying. It's what they all want. It's what she would have wanted," Jack continued. "Don't listen to him, Alex," Shaylee said. "We're with you." "To the end," Vixer added. "I'm just here for the after party," Hollis joked. Alex turned to Jack Newsom's ghost and repeated, "Is it broadcasting?" "All you have to do is push play." The image of the old man winked away. Alex searched the console until he found the familiar sideways triangle. He pushed it. A soft tone began to play over the speakers. It was the soft rhythm of a guitar, followed by a piano, as the song began to take and then change form. It was both relaxing and inspiring. "What? That's it?" Keller said aloud. Then there was a rattling, not from the speaker but from the ground, the sound of body parts slapping the metal floors. The team turned around and saw the formerly slain augmented soldiers convulsing violently. One even attempted to stand. Before it could, Vixer shot at it several times before it finally ceased to move. The other body squirmed a bit, its eyes wide open but lacking life. It stopped a few moments later, as surely as its ally had. "What the fuck?" Vixer asked aloud. Janet was standing on an overlook with her soldiers, keeping watch over the massive base camp. According to her liaison, Beruger had cleared several buildings to make land for all the armies coming to his aid. From the ridge, she could see his dome-shaped base where he would watch over his people. The early glimmer of the morning sun was shining on the reflective obsidian like glass that absorbed the sun's energy. She didn't have to turn her head much to see the Cloudbreaker reactor. Unlike New Purgatories, this one was above ground but covered by a massive concrete building. She had been given no explanation as to why this one was different than the others. Perhaps it was because it was the first. Or maybe Promise Beruger liked the idea of the world having to view his creation when they arrived in Berlin. The Australian Rangers were posted amongst the ramparts set up there. The streets just below the reactor building funneled people around it with little cover. If Alex decided to go through there with his team, he'd be dead before making it to the doorway. Janet fought back a cold chill. General Androv strode up beside her. While he had little to offer in the way of soldiers, Beruger wanted him in Berlin because of his expertise. Janet understood the reasoning. She and the general had spent many nights on the phone developing strategy. "It is strange knowing he is out there, watching us, waiting," the general said. "Beruger?" Janet asked. "God," Androv answered. "God?" Janet said, turning her head and raising her eyebrows. "Yes, Janet. Don't you believe?" "No. Never had reason to. I've always made my own fate. Nothing in a book changes the way we live. Never has, never will." "You don't believe this world was cursed to end?" "If the war was the end of the world, then God didn't do a decent enough job. And I'm willing to bet the ashes of several billion people don't feel saved," Janet replied. "But I won't put that on your God. God didn't do that. One man did. He's the one we should be worried about watching us right now." "Koslov," Androv said. "Yes, even if we are successful today with Alexander, I fear that his death will not be the only one today. Nothing will hold Beruger back with that threat gone." Janet nodded. She knew what Androv meant. The entirety of military that opposed Beruger was located on his doorstep. In a stroke, the man could end them if he chose to do so. Perhaps this was his plan the whole time. Janet's thoughts were distracted when she spotted one of Beruger's soldiers looking like he was having a seizure. Janet tapped her comm. "Amaris, get somebody down to Camp Section C. Someone's having an attack." The comm reply was silent. "Ma'am," one of her own soldiers yelled. She turned and saw a group of soldiers on loan from Beruger begin to experience the same attack as the soldiers below. "Drusilla, do you say this?" That was Woodson over the comm. "What the hell is going on?" Janet yelled. Androv tapped Janet on her shoulder, motioning for her to turn back towards the camps below them. A half-mile of camps all wriggled and squirmed amongst regular non-augmented soldiers. "I suppose Beruger has decided not to wait for Alexander's death. He is making his move now." Janet knew better, but kept her thoughts to herself. "Alex, what in the hell have you done?" Gunfire. The endless sound of round after round explosions followed, more deafening than any battle Janet had ever been in. The screams of war, both augmented and not. All she could do was raise her rifle and do the same. Thomas Beruger was sweating through his iron-collared shirt. The IFF signatures on his own soldiers had turned from a glowing green to a threatening red, and he had no idea why. "First, I must secure my compound and re-establish control." But Beruger knew it was too late. Even if he did regain control of his troops, the attack on the other nations would be considered a betrayal. That led him to the only possible explanation. The man that turned impossible possible, no matter what was thrown at him. Velasco. He knew the man had destroyed the Australian base, but he had never imagined that Alex or the rest of his team had the mental acumen to understand what was being studied there. A gross underestimation he was now paying for. The same research Beruger had done to make forcibly augmented civilian cause riots and unrest in enemy territory was now plaguing his own troops. And this time Beruger had no solution. He clicked his comm. "Mikhail, retreat carefully into my sanctum. The Crusaders have figured out the rampage system. I need you here." "Why was I not affected?" "Your database was not crafted here, so you lack the same controls as my soldiers. It has no effect over you. Now get back in here. This is not the time for an academic discussion." Beruger clicked his comm again and set the massive metal shutters to close around his domed castle. He would weather this storm, he would survive, and he would emerge the new leader of the free world. His plans were just accelerated now. Alex and his team were en route to Berlin, but the sound of gunfire was already audible far ahead of them. It was a whisper at first, but as the Silver Angel neared the city, the bangs, crashes, and explosions flooded the team's hearing. "Well, they're not shooting at us. That's a good sign," Vixer said, standing over Alex's shoulder. "Yeah, but they're shooting everyone else," Shaylee said behind her. "That's our golden opportunity." Alex said as the Hellchopper's comm began to blare. This is Velasco, Alex said with a half smile on his face. Alex, what the hell did you do? It was Janet's voice. Me? Nothing. I'm on a terrorist watch list after all. Cut the shit. Baruga's men ambushed all the other armies. It's a goddamn bloodbath down here. I imagine so. Makes you wonder why anyone would trust him. This was the perfect trap for his ambitions. Janet's comm cut back with static and the sound of gunfire before she spoke again. My troops and I are stuck in the camps. We need help moving to the reactor. If we can get there and lead the augmented towards it, the Rangers will have a field day. Alex looked back at his team. This is where we part ways. I'll put you down. Help Janet as much as you can and then get into the reactor. I owe her that much. What if she tries to stop our plan? Hollis asked. She won't if you tell her what is going to happen. They need to evacuate, all of them, Alex replied. He brought down the bird and opened the loading hatch. He heard bullets crash against the hull, and his team made for the gangway. Once they were out, he took off again. Tell me that was you, Janet said over the comm. Woo! Vixer yelled on the comm, which was followed by more gunfire. Alex, where are you? Janet yelled. You know where I'm going, Janet. My team is yours, but they're going to blow that reactor. That will kill everyone. Then get them out, Alex said. How the hell are we going to evacuate several thousand people? I'd suggest Hellchoppers. There isn't enough time. Alex thought for a moment as he buzzed Baruger's base. The entire city and surrounding areas would go off like an atom bomb, unless... Go on foot. Find vehicles, birds, anything, and retreat as far away as you can. Just get out of the protected part of the city, and trust me. God damn it, Alex. Good luck, Janet said. You too. As Alex cut off the comm, he heard an all-too-familiar sound. The blaring siren and red alarm that signaled a lock and overtook his senses. But it was already too late for him to react. Shit! Alex! Shaylee yelled. Hollis pulled her behind an overturned truck as bullets flew by the pair. He had seen what she had. One of the SAM rockets had slammed into the side of the bird. The craft didn't explode, but it was racing to the ground fast. We have to help him, Shaylee cried. We can't. Not now, Vixer called out, laying down fire back towards the camp. It was a gruesome scene. Bodies littered the ground, most wearing different uniforms from all the remaining armies in the world. Some were screaming, others wriggling and writhing in massive pools of blood. It was unavoidable, with each footstep, and hard to tell who friend or foe was. Janet rushed in from behind them, firing off several shots before ducking down behind the overturned truck. He took all of that missile, she said. Vixer turned as she reloaded her rifle. We have to move. What's the plan, General? Janet shook her head. We get as many of those sons of bitches to follow us as we can and run for cover, for the guy's getting our people out. An augmented soldier rushed the truck, but Hollis sidestepped with his blade and stabbed down at its thigh. Shaylee fired 2 shots that brought the being down. The pair recoiled back around the truck. How the hell do we get them to follow us, and how do you plan on getting the people out? They're everywhere, Vixer asked. When the carriers come in, we'll cover them while they get our people out. We fight, we recover, and we run, Janet replied. And the Hellchoppers. Androv got mine and his out. Australia's are behind the reactor. I'm writing Jerusalem off. Theirs were on the other side of the camp. Everyone else relied on us for transport. We'll have them make pickups where they can, but we don't exactly have a place to refuel here. The sound of roaring engines shook the ground beneath their feet. Trucks were on the move. That's our signal, Janet said. Vixer pulled the rack back on her rifle and raced out in the open, Hollis and Shaylee in tow. Smoke, dust, ash, fire. Alex's head was spinning, and all the smells reminded him of Yankee Stadium. But he wasn't in New Purgatory, he was in Berlin. The front end of the bird had made a nice crater in the side of Baruger's structure. The canopy was smashed, and behind him in the crew hold there was a fire burning. He could taste blood on his lips. He forced off his safety straps and pulled himself to his feet. As he went to the hold to go for his rifle, he felt the hull move. Oh, shit. Alex went back to the canopy, which had evened out, and gave him a decent view of the building he had given a new window. I'm not on the ground. He checked to make sure his parang and sidearm were still with him, and pushed the canopy open as far as it would go. He scraped his way onto the floor above him and pulled up. Only when his back was lying flat on the cold tile floor did he feel comfortable. When he finally pressed his body to rise, Alex saw the indentation and how little of the Silver Angel had penetrated the building. He shook his head and drew his pistol. He was on an office floor, cubicles and desks organized neatly. The sound of gunfire and screaming was far from here. He saw no people, and for a moment felt lost. I'm in, but how the hell am I going to find Baruger? Alex wandered the office, looking for an elevator or stairwell. He found an elevator at the end of the room, was still in working order. Alex pressed the up button, and the door opened. He took a step inside and looked at the numbers. Floors went up to 40. Looks like a key card is required for the last 3 floors. Some for the bottom, too. What floor am I on? Alex looked up at the digital sign. It read 23. He remembered most of Baruger's important projects had been on his bottom floor rather than on top. And all the important projects here are his own. Then he thought about the metal shutter that allowed the man to look out at the city. John Morrison was at the top so he could look down on his people. Baruger's building is low, but gives him a clear view of the sky above him, of the shielding for when he flips the switch on Cloudbreaker. That gave Alex 2 ideas. He pushed the 37th floor button and felt the inertia of the elevator pull him up. Alex shed his jacket and checked his sidearm once again. He wished he had a flask, and thought of Tyler. The man had died in an elevator, while his initial explosives had failed to work. He more than made up for it by giving his life to ensure the new ones went off. Alex wondered what that moment must have been like, dropping floor by floor, cigarette in his mouth and whiskey backwash in his throat, knowing he was about to meet his end. The elevator stopped. Alex raised his pistol. When the door opened, he was greeted by 3 augmented soldiers who looked up, not so much in surprise, but indifference. Shaley was firing blindly around a moving truck, while Hollis did his best to carry and drag fallen soldiers into the back of it. Vixer had no cover in the thick of the fight, sighting down nearly anyone that moved. Janet, behind another truck, was also causing her own amount of destruction. We need to pull back, Shaley yelled into the comm. They need medical attention. Just a little longer, Vixer shouted back. I see a few more of our men. She's right, Keeley. Break off, Janet yelled. I won't leave them behind, Vixer cried. That's an order. Turn the trucks around, Janet ordered. As the trucks began to turn, Vixer looked back, but kept pressing forward. Shaley went to go for her, but was stopped by Hollis. No way. The people in the trucks need you. I'll cover her for as long as I can. Shaley nodded and jumped onto the truck's bumper and reached for a medical satchel. It was a bloody mess, but she had been here before. She pulled out her tools and went to work. Vixer was more alone as each moment passed and the truck sped away. She took in the battlefield. The augmented were not only attacking her people, but also each other. Some with weapons, others not. Their aim was awful, but she knew all it took was one lucky shot. With the massive bodies, it was impossible to sort out who was targeting her, so instead, she looked for the distinct uniforms of her own people. She fired off shots against those that weren't her allies. Vixer, you need to fall back. Keeley ignored Janet's voice and raced forward towards one of her fallen friends. It was a man, breathing but barely. She might have even trained him at some point. Blood was drying on his lips. Vixer grabbed him by the collar with one hand and raised her rifle with the other, vainly pulling him back to the place the trucks had long left. Not another one. Not here. Not again, she said, still trying to fire her rifle, though it clicked empty. Vixer dropped it to the ground and kept dragging, though the man she pulled was now dead. Refusing to look up, to acknowledge what was happening around her, she was being surrounded by the raving augmented. Keeley trudged until she rolled her ankle from tripping over a body. As she fell to a knee, time slowed around her. The augmented had their rifles raised and were staring at her. No longer as people, but machines. Machines that would feel no remorse for what they had done and what they would do. She thought back on her life, being on the wrong side of history, and now on the wrong side of a rifle. She had done this, trying to save as many as she could, trying to reclaim honor which she had given away when she joined Morrison's Marines, trying to repeat what Sam Gates had showed her, what courage truly was back in Beijing. Her eyes glistened, and she felt a quick but hard pain catch her in the back. She cried out, but softly fell to the ground beside the man she had tried to save. Then there was an explosion. The boots that surrounded her scurried or flew away. Keeley realized then that she was having trouble feeling her legs, but felt her body lifted above the ground. She fought to turn her head. Keller. Hollis Keller had lifted over his shoulder, pistol extended in his other hand, firing on any that decided they wanted to move close to them, and he dragged her back behind the line, even as her world slowly went to darkness. Janet watched Keeley fall through her scope and winced away when she hit the ground. She almost didn't catch the stinger grenade going off and Hollis Keller swooping in to save her. A mercenary, a man with no country and no loyalty, risked himself to save a woman he hardly knew. Her best soldier had ignored a direct order and almost died for it. For a moment, Janet considered their places. The pain she knew her once rival had been in. Keeley had always been bitter, more so when Gates had died, but that was a cover for the loss she felt. It had taken her over the edge. Janet realized how close she had been once to that fate, why Alex kept her at arm's length after the tower. She needed to stop thinking. Janet retreated to the front of the moving truck to sight down any oncoming targets, while Hollis loaded Keeley into one of the moving vehicles. All the while, she hoped that Alex was still alive. Alex let off 3 quick shots that stunned the augmented soldiers, and ran at one, placing the pistol to its temple and pulling the trigger. The other 2 began to lift their weapons, but Alex responded with 2 more shots. This time, the soldiers fired back. Alex rolled hard to the side and fired again. The pair hit the ground, even though they still writhed on the floor. Alex let out a sigh and put his pistol back in his holster, then reached for one of the soldiers' rifles and gathered their clips. He looked through the bodies for a key card but found none. Then an alarm began to blare. Alex ran for a stairwell, but the door was locked. He reached for his parang and tried to wedge it between the door jamb. He managed to get the blade in and pry at the door. The alarm was blaring louder now. With all his might, he pushed forward. The door swung open, but the tip of the blade had shattered. Alex caught the glimpse of a military uniform and swung the blade hard at his enemy. He caught the soldier in the head, and it dropped. Alex let the soldier fall, but reached for his blade and kept pressing forward. Though the stairs winded him, he still reached for a smoke and lit it up as he kept up the stairs. He was constantly checking his corners as he went up each set. The lack of footsteps told him he was alone, so he pressed on, all the while taking long pulls and letting smoke fill his lungs. He had done this before, but with a team. Now he was alone, and Alex wasn't sure he'd reach the end goal. He let his feet do the thinking for him, one step at a time. It was his only choice now. As he had done thousands of times before, Mikhail Koslov watched from the shadows. He watched his old friend Alexander Velasco fill his lungs with smoke with every step the man took. Nothing more to stop him. It'll reach Beluga, and I will face him. That will be the end of it all. Koslov, where is he? Beruger's voice put a chill in Mikhail's spine. He was still not used to the lack of the database giving him information. The pain he had ignored in his joints as he crouched down, or the reluctance to follow orders from a man he hated. I have not found him yet. I am attempting a search. Beruger was quiet after that. The voice of Berlin's premier scientist shouldn't have bothered him, but it did. The scientist had failed to return him back to the way he was before he had become a traitor. Now it was impossible, and in remembering all he had done as both the Shadow and Mikhail Koslov would make it difficult to fight his old friend. He owed Alexander more than a stab in the back he had given Layla. The Shadow set his blade back in its sheath and followed Velasco as the man made his final upward ascent. By the end of today, only one of them would be left alive. Mikhail knew it would never go any other way. Janet's group had retreated beyond the Cloudbreaker reactor. The Australian Rangers were making short work of the augmented force that rushed after the retreating armies. Shaylee was standing over Keeley in one of the stopped trucks. A round had pierced her back, but Shaylee had pulled it and sutured the wound. You're going to be all right, Keeley. Just stay here. As if I have a choice, the captain said with a cough. Shaylee, I can't feel anything. I can't feel my legs. Shaylee winced. I've got you on a lot of morphine. You're not going to be able to move anything for a while, but you'll live. Vixer nodded at the medic, then rested her head on the truck flooring. Shaylee let out a sigh, then hopped out of the truck and made her way over to Trishella. Janet, we don't have a choice. We need to make for the reactor, Shaylee said. It's not secure. I'm pulling the Rangers back. The augmented will be all over you, Janet replied. If we don't set that reactor to blow, we might as well be dead already. They'll never get tired and they'll never slow down. They'll chase us out of the dead zone and finish us off one by one. We have to do this now, Shaylee explained. Janet put a palm on her forehead. Shaylee had the unfortunate position of being correct, just like Alex had been a year ago. That truth meant more people were going to die, but all would be lost if they didn't follow through. You're not going alone. Janet clicked her comm. Woodson, take over the retreat and get a bird to cover the reactor. My team is heading in. That's suicide. I need to pull my snipers back. Then do it. But you leave me one goddamn bird on the roof of that reactor, because unless that thing goes up in smoke, we're all dead. Woodson's end remained quiet. Janet pulled the rack back on her rifle and looked at Shaylee and Hollis. The mercenary was dumping a bottle of water over his head and staring down at his gun. She could only hesitate to guess what he was thinking after trying to rescue Keeley. He'd been successful, but something in his eyes was different now. Are you all right? She heard Shaylee say. Keller just gave her a nod. No smart remark, no nothing. He looked up at her and gave her a half smile. Shaylee rested a hand on his shoulder. Keller responded by reloading his pistol, checking the blades on his chest scabbard, and giving her a nod. Janet moved over to the two. It's now or never. Come with me. The trio broke from the main group and into the reactor. Soldiers who were sniping from above ran past them. The Australians were ready to go home, and Janet and crew were rushing in the opposite direction, as they had so many times before. So far, there were no targets to shoot, but Janet knew that would change. The trio reached the main reactor room. Janet looked at Shaylee. Do you know what to do? No, but Hollis does. Keller had already gone to work on the console. Janet raised her rifle and looked towards the various entrances and exits. When she began to see movement, she fired. You better work quick. They're already here. When Alex reached the top of the stairs, his body felt like it was beginning to fail. The adrenaline of the crash had worn off, and he felt tension in his legs, arms, and back. He wondered if he had bruised something when he hit the building. He let his pistol fall to his side. He was surprised to see the door at the top unlocked. He took a deep breath and tightened his grip on his pistol and entered the room, though what he saw he did not expect. The room was massive and open like a large observatory. The windows were broad and stretched out to the sky, though they were covered by a metal grating now. In the center of the room sat a man in a chair looking over a console. Alex took slow steps towards the man, his pistol raised. He had to fight the urge several times to fire his weapon into Beruger's back, though it would have been well deserved. But Alex wanted to see the man's face, wanted him to know fear, wanted him to see the last year of Alex's life scarred on his face, on his hands, and his heart. As Alex neared Beruger, the man spun his chair around, and for the first time in person, the two met each other's gaze. And so you are here, Alexander. Is it much like your meeting with John Morrison? Is there a sense of accomplishment merely by standing in my domain? Do the lives you've thrown away to get here give you that much more meaning while you stand in front of an old, dying carcass of a man? Beruger said. Alex raised his pistol up at Thomas Beruger, but the old man did not look away. It means more than that, Doctor. It means those lives weren't wasted in vain. It means that today one of us is at our end, maybe even both of us. I can die happy knowing that's the case, Alex replied. Beruger scoffed. Oh, and for what, Velasco? Knowing that you've robbed this new world of its one chance to ascend higher than the way it was in the days before the war? You'd ruin the last true vestige of the old world for your own cause? Alex shook his head. Rob, you, Morrison, you tried to subjugate us, to rule. You never wanted peace, you wanted power. You wanted to shape this world in an image that pleased you, and damn everyone else who tried to stop you. Beruger's eyes went wide, and he forced himself up and out of his wheelchair. You know nothing. My sacrifices were not those of John Morrison. Franklin Morrison and I saved this world, saved its people. You are only breathing through the grace of our combined intelligence. Yet you fight for the same people who killed him, and now you're here to kill me. You, your people, you're all monsters.
You hold on to what you see as slights to your poverty, and you take arms, seeing yourself as freedom fighters against a formless entity whose only goal is to hold you down. How many times were those people offered a way into the New World only to spit in the face of your so-called oppressors, forming gangs and militias to fight back against progress? The reality, Alexander, is that you and those people you sought to defend are nobody in the larger scheme of this world. You're contemptible, beneath the notice of those who can profoundly change the world. Why, you're nothing more than a thug with a gun, a stale breeze against a gale. You change nothing, no matter how much you choose to rebel.
Alex let his pistol fall to his side. You're wrong, Doctor. We did change the world. We exposed you. We exposed the liberties you've taken. You might see yourself as a savior, but your troops show you to be nothing more than any sick fuck I've run into out in the wastes, subverting science to advance their own power. Beruger shook his head and fell back into his chair.
You will never understand, boy. How could you? You never saw the old cycle of life, how people like yourself rebelled, fought against power only to repeat the mistakes of your forebears. Do you understand what that does? It creates another uprising. It may not be against you, but your children, or their children. It creates a loop of endless destruction, where each generation believes they know better than the last. It breeds tyrants and kills progress. The same men and women you want to destroy.
Alex stared at the scientist. His words made sense in a way. Then how are you any different? How can you expect people to follow you if you try to kill them? You waste them on experiments and take away what they are so you can kill more people? Alex asked.
Beruger sighed. It was my thought that if humanity was subjugated, then it would conform to the rule given to them. Men and women would be afraid to fight for fear of death. Society might be less free, but there would be no more war, no more death, no more need for tools like Cloudbreaker or world-destroying weapons that they could never understand the consequences of. Their hope was that one day they would no longer need the shackles we put on them, that they could eventually be freed once the insatiable bloodlust that has strangled humanity for so long was just a filthy memory. But I can see now I was wrong. The rise and fall of revolutions are nothing any man can predict or prepare for. Somehow, outliers always exist and kill the advancements we make.
So what happens now? Alex asked. Beruger nodded and pointed beyond Alex. The younger man turned, and behind him stood Mikhail Koslov. The shadow stared at his old friend, and his old friend at him.
As so many wars before ours have ended by simple slaughter, so too will this one come to a bloody end, Alexander. There is no other way it can end.
Call him off, Beruger, Alex ordered.
No, you believe yourself so firmly correct in your stance. I feel the same of mine. You will fight him, and the victor will decide the course of this world. Koslov, I am giving you this final gift. You were never a man, not truly, just another experiment. A toy created by a government that didn't understand the power it held. I give you back the shadow, database, but you will always remember who you are and who you were, emotions or not.
Beruger spun around in his chair and back towards his console. Alex saw that Mikhail had dropped to a knee. He looked to be in an intense pain, but was gripping his knife tightly. When it was done, he rose and shifted his vision. Alex gripped Elias's pistol and held it up towards the shadow. What did you do? Alex asked.
For a second time, I have done only what he has asked of me,
Beruger replied. Dr. Beruger has reverted my mind. I am only the shadow once again, or perhaps, Mikhail's voice trailed, more. I know who I am, who I was, though I am no longer bound by the emotions that came with being the man. If I still felt, it would be of relief. Alex shook his head and looked at his old compatriot. You killed Layla so you could remember, and now you'll kill me so you can forget. Forget all you've done. All you should have to live with. You were worse than anything I've ever been, Mikhail. Mikhail shifted his eyes once more. Once more, I am sorry, Alexander. I have changed your fate yet again, but it must be this way. Alex had beaten Mikhail the man, but not Mikhail without the pain, without the emotions. He was different. Like the augmented, he was unaffected by pain or fear. I'd expect nothing less. Janet was firing off directed rounds at each of the entrances, but she could not stop the flow of soldiers rushing towards her and her team. The augmented were endless, climbing over their dead to reach her. She had run out of time. Keller, Janet yelled. Done, the man yelled back. It's time to go. Hollis pulled up from the console and began to fire his rifle as the team raced back for one of the rear exits. The augmented rushed for them and the console. Janet stayed a few steps behind her team and kept firing until her rifle clicked empty. She went to reach for another clip, but found herself out. Shit, she said aloud, looking back to Hollis and Shaley. Hollis stared at her. His gun had already run dry, as had Shaley's. Keller shook his head and reached for one of the short blades on his chest. Not one more, Hollis said. He motioned for them to follow him as he rushed one of the doors, cutting and tearing his way across the augmented as they rushed back at him. For the first time since they'd met, Shaley saw a smile come across the bounty hunter's face as he carved the trio a path out of the building. With his blades gripped tightly, he cleared the way into a hall until they saw no more augmented coming in their direction. Shaley threw down her rifle and passed him, as did Janet. In that moment, Keller stopped and looked down at his hands, the blood covering them. He could see and feel everyone he had ever killed in that moment. Why now? Because now, if for just a moment, he believed in being more than a soldier of fortune. He had risked his life for a cause he hadn't cared about. His life in this moment meant more than any money he would ever earn or spend. He had earned the greatest reward, a place he could call home, people he could rely on, something he had never experienced before. Keller, Janet yelled. Hollis broke the thought as another augmented tried to rush him. He hurled both blades at the same time, catching the soldier in the skull. He didn't stop to watch. He ran after Janet and Shaley, leaving his blades and those old memories behind. Mikhail and Alex circled each other for a few moments. Neither said a word as Beruger watched from the side. In a way, Alex found it comical that a man who seemed to have no interest in war was partaking in blood sport like those back in Old Cairo. Mikhail moved in and attempted to slash at Alex. Alex raised his parang with a single hand and tried to swing back. The pair doubled back and continued to circle. Alex could feel the weariness in his body. He wouldn't be able to contend with Mikhail blade to blade for long. He moved in and lifted the parang over his head and cut downward. But Mikhail was no longer where Alex had brought down his blade. The shadow sidestepped and threw a kick to the back of Alex's thigh, then took a step back. There was no taunting, no laugh. Alex stood back up and forced himself to turn and face his foe. Mikhail was back on him with a thrust, and Alex managed to jump away and swung his blade wide, catching Mikhail across the belly. His skin suit did not cut or fray. The material had protected the assassin. Alex used the momentum to spin and tried to attack again, but Mikhail stopped the blade with one of the serrated edges, twisted and hurled the blade from Alex's hands, sending it crashing to the ground near Beruger. Alex was taken by surprise. Mikhail rushed Alex and attempted to slash him across the chest, but Alex dodged and reached for Elias's pistol at his side. Mikhail tried to throw a fist down to knock it out of the man's hands, but he was too slow. Alex fired his pistol into Mikhail's stomach. The shadow caught the round's full force, but stood upright as if untouched. Alex's eyes went wide as he stared at Mikhail. The pair were so close they could feel each other's breath on their faces. Mikhail shifted his vision, and for the first time, Alex felt afraid of the shadow. Mikhail replied to the pistol fire by driving his blade upwards into Alex's side, catching him between two ribs. Alex felt Mikhail twist the knife, but forced himself to lift Elias's gun again and fired once, twice, 3 more times into Mikhail's chest, until the gun could not fire any more. It dropped from his hands out of weakness and fell to the floor. He could feel the shadow's grip of the knife and his side go limp. Mikhail dropped to his knees and then hit the floor, but Alex stayed upright. He forced himself to move towards Beruger and pulled the shadow's knife from his body. The scientist looked up at him. Now there was fear in the doctor's eyes. With one hand on his wound, Alex forced the blade to Beruger's throat. The shielding started now. Beruger said not one word and tapped several buttons on the console. First, the metal grating opened, exposing the darkened sky, slowly becoming brighter as morning began. He pressed a few more buttons and the bubble of the Cloudbreaker shielding enveloped Berlin. The doctor looked towards the sky, as did Alex. Janet, Shaley, and Hollis had made it to the roof where a hell chopper was waiting for them. The three jumped in, but Janet was already yelling, "Where's everyone else?" "Outside the city, ma'am. When your team doubled back, our pursuit stopped. We're the last ones out." Janet went quiet as the pilot began to fly away. She looked back at the city of Berlin. Through the smoke and darkness, she could see the sun begin to rise on the horizon. As they made their exit, she saw the Cloudbreaker shield take golden form. They were well beyond it. Alex looked out at the dissipating clouds and the shield that took form beyond the city's limits. He reached into his fatigues and found the detonator rigged to the reactor. He played with it for a moment, and then grabbed Thomas Beruger by the neck and lifted him from his chair. "Look at what you wrought, Thomas, and feel how she felt right before she died." He pressed hard on the detonator. An explosion rang out, a large mushroom cloud in the center of the city. Alex could feel Beruger shaking. He drove his knife into the man's back, twisting it and forcing it deeper. He listened to the man gasp and struggle until he was gone. After Beruger fell to the floor, Alex began to feel weak himself. With heroic effort, he looked back towards Mikhail's body, but the shadow was gone, a trail of blood leading back towards the elevator. Alex let out a half laugh as he let his knees slam against the floor. "This would have made a great journal entry," he said. He looked out at the observational window and saw the winds from the blast blow hard and fierce. The outside world would be protected from the nuclear explosion's hatred and rage as it swept across buildings and places life had once flourished. Alex let one last smile come across his face. He knew he had done one thing right. His body warmed, and the sound of metal warped around him for one final time. Alex's last thought, as his eyes closed and the room melted around him, was of Layla. Janet stood on a ridge outside of Berlin. The sound of a hell chopper landing beside her, and a fierce wind, all but light compared to the destruction inside the Cloudbreaker shielding. When the firestorm dissipated and the shielding failed, Berlin was nothing more than a crater of twisted metal and dirt. The place she had just fought, the people, dead, alive, augmented, were now all gone. Nothing more than a memory, with no evidence that they had ever existed. She hoped for a moment that the bird landing behind her was Alexander, that he had escaped before Berlin's ultimate moment, but she knew the sound of the Silver Angel, and that too was gone. His death hadn't hit her yet, but she knew it would, either on the way home or back in New Purgatory. It was all over, but the cost had come too high. She let out a sigh and felt a hand rest on her shoulder. Janet Trishella let out a sigh and turned around to see a hooded figure, the same soldier from earlier. The soldier she knew all too well. The soldier reached for their hood, and the mask underneath it, pulling it off and revealing cold blue eyes and white blonde hair. It was Layla Lansfield. She was a ghost to some, but not to Janet. The only ghost had been the old man, the computerized image of Jack Newsom, a role Layla had played well enough to fool Alex and everyone around him. The pain, the guilt of that lie she now felt in her heart was enough for her to wish she hadn't gone along with Layla's plan. Janet turned back to the wreckage, the destruction. "It's over," Janet said aloud. She wanted to say more, but she didn't have the words. She had lied to her friend. the man that would have done anything for her, who had given everything to end this final threat to New Purgatory, to what they had built. She felt tears run down her cheeks. She didn't want to look back at Layla, to see her reaction, to see if she felt the slightest bit of guilt over the manipulation of Alexander Velasco.
Baruga was proved a traitor. And Alex,
Layla started.
He did what you needed him to do,
Janet answered. When she looked back, she saw Layla's eyes were as wet as hers.
But this isn't over, Janet. There's one loose end,
Layla said.
The hell chopper that left.
Alex? Janet said with faint hope in her voice. Layla shook her head and put her hood back on, turning back around towards the hell chopper, leaving Janet alone to contemplate the end, the new, and the next.